Welcome back to Building the Burbs, guys. My name is Howard. I don't have a co-host today, but we're just gonna rock it out. I'm with an amazing guest, Drew with Fandundr. Thank you for coming on, man. Just kind of tell the people about Fandundr, how it works, and we can get into this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on today, Howard. Honored to be here. Uh, so to tell you a little bit about FanFunder, essentially what we're building is a platform for community-driven commerce, right? So today, as a consumer, you have virtually no influence or ability to dictate your own customer experience. Meaning, if you want your favorite restaurant to do a curated menu, or you and call it 25 of your friends or just the local community, um, there's essentially three ways you could go about that. One would be to have a personal relationship with the restaurant owner or manager, such that you can make these suggestions, right? Number two would be to basically pay for a private event yourself, right? Which requires you to, flex a big bag,
Yeah,
which is, a thing, right?
yeah,
But puts all the onus on you, the individual. Number three would be, I say this jokingly, but to create like a flash mob on like Twitter or something like that, where a bunch of people in the neighborhood are asking this restaurant to do a thing,
yeah,
do this curated menu. We all want to see this, right? All three of those options are fair, but not exactly the most efficient or effective way to go about trying to bring a new experience to fruition. And so, what FanFunder would allow you to do in that situation is actually pool your capital with, 15 to 20 of your closest friends, or again, just people who are in the neighborhood or
hmm
who are also patrons of the restaurant, and say, hey, we want to see you guys do this thing, whether it's like a, Japanese whiskey and Wagyu beef pairing type curated menu.
yeah,
If you're looking at like a steakhouse like Rathbun's or something like that, right? But essentially, you're putting together your money, you're pre-selling yourself into an experience that is tied to a request for the restaurant, right? And so you're saying, hey, we want to do this curated menu, but also we want to be able to personalize it based on XYZ factors, whether that's, choosing music, DJ, or choosing what type of cocktails will be served, ingredients for the food, so on and so forth. And so, on one end of the spectrum, from a consumer angle, you're basically bringing net new cultural moments to life,
hmm
right? On the other end, from a what we call producer perspective, which is essentially the umbrella term for any brands, restaurants, creators that would be fielding these crowdfunding campaigns, um, we're de-risking your go-to-market for innovation. So you're, again, as a restaurant, creating these exclusive dining experiences that are de-risked financially because your community has already pre-sold themselves into it, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's coming to you as inbound revenue essentially. And not only are they de-risking it financially, they're de-risking it operationally as well, because you're turning over to them different elements that they can vote on to curate the night, so you can make sure it's a hit. Like I said before, it's, what are some of the main ingredients, what are some of the themes, maybe sonically, um, what kind of drinks do you want paired with these, menu items. And so the whole idea is really to create this bilateral chain of communication between the consumer and the producer in our economy, um, such that we as the average citizen now have the ability to essentially create our own reality,
yeah,
right? As far as the things that you purchase, consume, and whatnot, especially those things that are very closely related to your cultural identity.
yeah,
And then on the other side, we open up this massive opportunity for innovation and for um, market research, really, on the side for the brands and the creators, et cetera. Because again, now their communities are telling them, "Hey, we want you to do these things, and we'll pay you to do them,
yeah.
and we'll also
Yeah,
tell you
turn that down.
exactly how we want them done
Yeah,
within the guardrails that you provide to us to help paint that experience." But ultimately, like, it's a win-win. It's
mhm.
inbound revenue for the producer, and from the consumer angle, it's again control over your life in a way that we haven't seen before.
And like you said, it's a way we haven't seen before. Like, what kind of caused you to have this idea? Was it like um in the crowdfunding space, like you were seeing some things that could have been better, or like what was the like origin story behind this?
Yeah, so the catalyst for this is actually really interesting. I've been sitting on this idea for almost 11 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's been a minute. They always say that
Yeah.
overnight success really takes a long time, and
Yeah.
what you typically see is the tip of the iceberg. I actually tried creating Fandundr 10 years ago, but not in the scope that it is today. So origin story, when I was 20 or so,
Okay.
21, I had to be 21 because I was drinking. Maybe I wasn't, who knows? But when I was around that age, you
Yeah.
know, me and one of my best friends were really big fans of this rapper named Currency.
Okay.
And in this time, Currency was not coming through Atlanta as often as we wanted him to, but he was always in Miami, always playing in Miami. And so we would just hop in the car, you know what I'm saying, drive down on a Friday night to go see the show. You know, we had people in Miami, so it was cool to hang out and, you know,
Yeah.
vibe or whatnot. But life would call us back the next day.
Uh,
And that whole trip was really just to go see the show and get back because that show wasn't in my backyard.
yeah.
And I was just like, yo, what? Why can I not convince him to come to Atlanta more often? Because he has fans here, right? Like, why can we not just crowdfund our own concert to essentially entice him, you know, monetarily? And so me and that same friend, because he was an engineer at University of Miami, was in Atlanta with me at the time, uh, decided to try to build this crowdfunding platform for concerts specifically. Again, we were really early at that time, not
Yeah.
only from like a technical infrastructure standpoint, but also just in terms of the status quo with how the industry works,
Yeah.
and the appetite for, you know, community driven experiences was not there. I think ignorance also had us trying to position the platform as a displacement for the promoter, which again, when you have no technical or economic leverage,
Yeah.
is a losing game. So, you know, early learning lessons in that regard. Um, had to fold that up for a bit and actually go learn how to build a business, which I did, you know, with being the first employee at Kobiton shortly thereafter that.
Okay.
Did that for about 7.5 years. Um, and then in 2023, left because I invested, you know, my stock twice at that point and had kind of seen the entire life cycle of building that company for the most part,
Okay.
and said, hey, you know, I want to get back into entrepreneurship, so I can make some real money,
Yeah.
and figure out, you know, what I can build at the convergence of technology, business, and culture. Um, and at that time, Web3 was also kind of growing a lot, and the whole idea of the, you know, creator economy and ownership economy, um, was just in the zeitgeist, and you know, it kind of got me back inspired in this motion and in this mode of like, yo, as a consumer, I should have more control over the things that I'm experiencing,
Yeah.
the things that I'm purchasing. Because I mean, you know, again, fast forward at this point, like I've made a little money. Now I'm like, I want to spend my money on things that I like, not things that I'm being told I like
Yeah.
because of an
Exactly.
Instagram algorithm,
Yeah.
right? And so at that point, I'm like, you know, there needs to be a way for me to pool capital with other people and bring a thing to fruition. Um, and again, that's kind of like the abridged version of many nights doing research, kind of thought experiments, so on and so forth. And then again, just really trying to synthesize both that past feeling of I want this, can't have this, need to figure out a way to manifest this, i.e., like the concerts in my city,
Yeah.
right, which is very much tied to my youth and, you know, just kind of like this naive view of like how the world should work despite it not working that way. And that kind of being the passion connected to now me seeing, I think, from an infrastructure standpoint, um, a lot more of the nuances, a lot more of the, you know, regulatory environments, a lot more of just the general uh, things in place that can be fixed and or like more efficient, but from a business lens, right? Not so much just like a young, like I want to build this
Yeah.
thing. And so I was like, okay, cool. This feels like a big enough opportunity for me to take a leap here and embark on this journey. So yeah.
And I know you like it sounds like it kind of came a lot from your experience. So as far as like the validation process and like knowing that, okay, I know that I would want this, and I'm pretty sure other people want this, but was there ever a stage where you went out to kind of just make sure that people wanted this, or did you just kind of go into it knowing like pretty sure people will want this just as me?
That's a great question. So I think to me it was obvious that other people will want this, which was a very intuitive feeling based on qualitative analysis of just being
Yeah,
my own customer, right?
yeah,
And my friends being my customers. Um, but what I really needed to validate was the producer side of the
mm,
value proposition, meaning would brands, would creators, would restaurants, etc., find this valuable? When I initially restarted this endeavor in 2023, I was very much focused on creators in the music industry.
okay,
Really fortunate to have a good friend by the name of Ryan Haslam, who does a lot of talent management and creator uh, liaisoning, if you will, for some music tech companies. And
cool,
so he was able to make some really early key introductions to artist managers that allowed me to basically, you know, test my value proposition, um, do some customer discovery, and really just understand what their pain points were. And it became very clear very quickly that this was a thing. Um, the caveat I'd say with music was, again, it still is so infrastructure heavy with so much red tape that
yeah,
while I was simultaneously getting validation on the value proposition, I was also learning that we would still be early as far as applying the solution to that sector, because there's a lot of friction with that.
yeah,
So while validating that it's, hey, we love hearing from our fans, we love, you know, increasing revenue. We love the idea of strengthened brand loyalty by bringing the fan into the process of co-creating a moment, right? It was also, you know, uh, I don't want to have too much uh, creative control be relinquished to the
yeah,
fan because I'm an artist,
yeah,
like, and this is how I record my music, or like this is how I want to do my show, or type stuff. Also, how do you uh, triangulate a crowd funded concert with the venue holding a date when it may or may not be a thing?
yeah,
How do you involve the booking agent? It's just all these things where I'm like, oh shit,
yeah.
um,
It's a
this is
lot.
gonna work at some point, but
Yeah,
right now might not be the time. Which then caused us to say, okay, well, who else has this type of business case whereby they need to increase revenue, they need to deepen brand affinity, they want competitive differentiation through user generated content and the moments they're able to create that help them stand out from a brand standpoint. Um, and I'm like, okay, well, what's something that me as a consumer and my friends we get really like passionate about on a Friday night? Like, what's something you argue about with your friends when it's time to go somewhere? And it's like, where are we going to eat?
yeah,
Or again, like what show are we going to? Right? If it's a concert kind of situation, what party are we going to? Kind of stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, uh, people get really passionate from a community standpoint around. Restaurants are also vertically integrated in that they, you know, I don't have to connect a venue to an
yeah,
artist via a promoter and a booking agent. It's like you own your restaurant or you lease it, right? You are the artist for all intents and purposes in terms of product, your chefs, etc. You've already got the audience. You've got people who come on a recurring basis. You've got people who spend more than others, which you would identify as, call it a VIP customer slash like high intent slash high spender,
yeah,
right? So you've got the perfect storm for this, very similarly passionate space that music exists in, um, but it's just easier and
yeah,
it's more packaged, right? So then we started the process of just reaching out to restaurants and bars and be like, hey, we see that you have a happy hour. You see that you've got, a wine down Wednesday. You see that you do brunch on Sunday, right? But there are also opportunities for you to maximize your retail space because you've got I also see you're closed from 2 to 5 on Tuesday, Wednesday, right? And maybe you're not open on Thursday, and it's like, why are you not monetizing that?
Yeah.
And if it's, what I think to be true is a cost versus risk calculation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just not feasible. Well, that's probably because you're not doing anything to really incentivize enough people to come out
Yeah.
and, you know, get involved in the space. So why not plug those, dead nights or empty hour time slots with community generated events that are already, pre-sold.
Mm.
Um, and what we found was they were already trying to figure out how to do more than just the basic shit, right? They wanted to innovate. But either they lacked the ideas, which is where the community generated piece comes in, or again, because restaurants are already low margin in terms of operational costs and, profit,
Yeah.
they couldn't take the risk on it being a flop because you'd have to purchase the inventory from a food standpoint in order to create this curated experience ahead of time, assuming that it's going to sell out, right? So it was a win-win in that regard. And then we said, okay, well, what other vertical can we do this with? Because now I'm seeing that this is valuable from a B2B standpoint. And then we kind of looked at retail, and so we started calling high-end retail stores like YSL or Chanel or Prada, et cetera, and saying, hey,
Mm.
you've got a new consumer on the rise. It's the millennial and Gen Z high earner. And they want differentiated in-store shopping experiences. How are you guys thinking about that? And, it's a domino effect of we talk to one and they'd be like, yeah, we want to innovate, but again, we don't have ideas. Or what we found really interesting, what was really interesting was that the stores, if we call it into a mall, uh, they have the ability to greenlight their own experiences, their own events, separate from corporate. They don't have to go do that. But
Yeah.
corporate's only thing is you have to have the budget to do it yourself because you can't pull from a marketing budget in order to put this on. So their hands are tied where they have, this retail space that they can activate in. They've got, a jiggy audience that wants to like do dope stuff, spend a lot of money. Um, they may or may not have an idea for how to activate that audience in the space, but ultimately it comes down to not having the funds
Yeah.
to make it happen. So it was like, oh wait, we can just actually have your community crowdfund this for you, and tell you again how to curate that experience in the store. And so when I say it was a domino effect, it was like the first store we kind of had this aha moment with was YSL, and then we were able to kind of package that conversation and those insights, and then just kind of like rinse and repeat that from a customer discovery
Yeah.
standpoint. But really, that customer discovery was a Trojan horse for a soft pitch for them to join us for a pilot or partner with us for a pilot. And that's been like the last 3 months or so. So yeah.
I mean, the way it sounds like if I was a producer, I mean, I would jump right on it. But like, were there any objections or anything when you were pitching?
Yeah, so I think there's different scenarios where we're not a fit, right? One, okay, this is a really good question. So this gets into like the nitty gritty of creating like an ICP,
Okay.
right? Ideal client profile and like what the traits of them are. What we noticed is in retail, we can almost guarantee that the manager of a retail store is going to be down with what we're pitching as long as we're targeting the right type of store. And the psychology behind that is if you're maxed out as the manager of a retail store like YSL, et cetera, right? Your next goal is to like ascend into corporate. And the way you ascend into corporate management from there is by making your store stand out.
Mm.
Ways to make your store stand out include innovation, boosting sales, boosting brand affinity, boosting foot traffic, UGC, all of that good stuff, whatever it is for your store compared to others across
Yeah.
the world, United States, et cetera. We have a tool that allows you to do that, right? That person is monetarily and psychologically incentivized to test things that will make their store more successful.
Yeah.
If you look at certain restaurants, right, whereby they don't belong to a hospitality group, maybe it's just like a single restaurant. owned by, successful restaurateur, right? Maybe just a chef that's done really well, right? The manager there may or may not, but in most cases we found, see a path to upward mobility.
Yeah.
So they're fine where they're at, right? Like, our revenue is fine every week.
Yeah.
Like we're hitting our targets. Like, what do I need to add more complexity or tools to my life? Or like when I'm solid, right? Because he's or she's not looking like, how do I
get more,
right?
Yeah.
So just like nuances like that are things that we started uncovering and having a lot of conversations around. Who is in our ICP, not only from a restaurant or bar or just creator whatever standpoint, but the decision maker that we're getting into from a business development standpoint with that first outreach. We want to reduce the friction there as much as possible. So like, what type of person would we be talking to? So coupling that really helped us start targeting more efficiently. I know you asked about rejections and objections, and I gave you a little bit more. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, it definitely did.
Yeah.
Definitely
Okay.
did. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by Hatchbridge Incubator. Hatchbridge Incubator is a partnership between Kennesaw State University and the Cobb Chamber of Commerce. We offer entrepreneurs the programs, the support, and the accountability that they need to build their businesses. We have programs and we have facilities for them to use. So our new facility will launch off of Chastain Road in the summer of 2025. We'll have 9 private offices for companies. We'll also have dedicated hot desk space for them to work at, and we'll have an event facility there as well. Learn more at hatchbridge.com.
Again, you didn't ask this, but shout out my CTO for our roadmap. We're looking at dominating event crowdfunding from a community standpoint first, right? And so events are things like curated dining at restaurants, in-store shopping experiences at your favorite retail, right? From there, we want to be able to prove that we can do that with things like meet and greets, things like after parties, things like acoustic sets at Airbnbs, right? For artists, right? Things that are like very much outside of the venue infrastructure.
Yeah.
But us building the infrastructure from a community generated standpoint to make those things happen. Once we knock down that domino, we will begin pivoting into things like products, right? So again, going back to the conversation about like having Nike build you a custom shoe and ship it to you as an individual, looking at a fraternity and having them be able to do the same thing as a group purchase order, right? So getting into things like that.
Yeah.
Once we kind of knock down those 2 walls where it's like, okay, we figured out events, and now we figured out events for like influencers and celebrities, musicians, whatever you want to call that creator room, right? Once we figured out that, once we figured out products, we build in our mind this kind of defensible moat around this idea of community generated commerce and crowdfunding new experiences, whether they're products, whether they're events, right? At that point, we say, okay, cool. Now let's point this at the music industry and really just kind of go knock down these walls, because we've got the network effects in place. Yeah. We've got the behavioral patterns trained from both the consumer and producer standpoint. There's enough validation that this is profitable. What are the indie artists that can do this within the venue infrastructure, and what venues are willing to partner with us because they see it as an opportunity to like fill dead space, right?
Yeah.
Knock that down. Now it's like, all right, how do we start talking about community generated music and content, right? Like, what does that look like in terms of bringing that new album together? What does it look like to do a versus battle with like Nas and Jay-Z?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
how you do it?
Right? Like, how do you make that happen? How big is that bag?
Yeah.
And so that's the North Star for us, is really just to kind of tackle this in a modular fashion. And then once we're strong enough, right, this whole new thing about not being a unicorn, being an elephant. Once we're strong enough, basically just kind of flexing the muscle and leveraging the momentum to say, all right, music industry, like come play, because, artists are already looking for new ways to differentiate revenue streams. here's an opportunity to again have inbound revenue at the record label level, where you've got 2 million fans asking Taylor Swift to do XYZ. You can do that rinse and repeat every day in perpetuity, right?
It's limitless.
You know what I mean? And then same thing with like sports, right? Like, why can't I see KD and LeBron go one-on-one?
Yep.
In a game of 21.
Yeah.
Right. How big is that bag? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Right. So these are the type of things that we want to get to from a big brain standpoint, but we very much understand that the path to that is going to be arduous and paved with just knocking down various milestones around validating this and the fact that it works for consumers and producers in various cultural pillars.
So is that what you would say is what's next for Fandundr? It's just kind of reaching out to the music industry, or do you have some additional things that you like to accomplish?
So I'd say the music industry stuff is probably, I'm being realistic again, shout out to our roadmap, about a year away. Right now. I think we're very nascent in the event crowdfunding validation aspect. Again, we can build a lucrative business off the back of restaurants and retail alone, right? We've validated that enough through customer discovery and just kind of market research and looking at the sizing of the market, right? Even down to some extrapolation we've been able to do in terms of how much of the market might be our ICP. Shout out ChatGPT and AI and being able to do these simulations and build these data models. So we feel really good about that. The next step for us right now is deliver our product, this next version of our product, so that we can start knocking down these use cases, restaurants and retail at scale, right? And really just show that this is viable and can scale and make money for both sides of the market, right? Meaning them and us. Us for investors, them for continued traction in the market. So that's really the next step for us right now. And then after that, I think we'll start to turn our heads toward more of the creator economy. We've been looking at some really interesting things happening in Twitch kind of realm right now, the streamer realm, whereby there's a lot of parallels to the community kind of fandom aspect between the streamers and like the independent musician right now. And there's way less red tape than the music industry when dealing with the streamers. Absolutely. So like we're also thinking about that from like a testing standpoint to see what that creator relationship can look like. And that may happen in the next, call it 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, some people are saying like the streamers are more powerful than the music artists at this point, and might be right.
Yeah, we try to be very forward thinking.
Yeah.
Looking around the corner to see what's next, because again, I think I've just always been in this place. I'm getting used to being early.
That's a good thing.
And resting in the energy of understanding that things will catch up, but also as I've gotten older and more experienced as an operator, the other side of that is leveraging the opportunities when they're early and low risk, low stakes, where other people don't see them. So again, high upside, low risk. So yeah, we're really excited about streamers. We're really excited about restaurants. We're really excited about pop-ups, from a food standpoint. We're really excited about retail. I think the one thing that I'm really like kind of my most passionate like use case for this outside of like the the concerts is we can figure out how to bring that new characters out of the MCU, right, Marvel Comic Universe or in DC. You know what I mean? Like if I can get like a Batman Beyond movie made, right? Like that's where I really want to take this.
That would be crazy.
Yeah,
that would be crazy. So kind of like that early like mindset that you said you have. Is that something you've always had? Because I know a lot of people just kind of get stuck in their ways a little bit. Like if they feel like something is working, even if it isn't working, they're like not really wanting to switch, you know. So that's something you always had, or did you kind of have to develop that?
Uh, can you rephrase that question for me? Sorry.
Okay. So having an early mindset, right, at being able to adapt to things that are changing in the industry,
Mm.
is that something you've had to learn to have, or is that something you've always had?
So I think at the root of that is adaptability,
Okay.
right? I'm a serial procrastinator. as like one of my, call it character flaws,
Okay.
but I make up for it with accelerated momentum in kind of like longer sprint work cycles.
Okay.
That makes sense. So I think in high school, one of the things I started figuring out was if I'm going to procrastinate on like studying for this test or like getting this assignment done, I'm also going to have to deal with variables
Yep.
showing up in crunch time.
Yep.
So if I got a day to do this and like, I got basketball practice randomly or like my dog gets sick, kind of things.
Yeah.
I still have to figure out how to like find a more efficient, effective way to get it done now with shorter time. And that happened to me enough times. This actually sounds terrible. Happened to me enough times to where I just got really comfortable with like shifting gears and pivoting while maintaining like the North Star and being able to like deliver an outcome. And I think that from a mental framework has translated into the way I look at trends and external factors in terms of how they affect my business and the things I'm doing operationally today. All that being said, like to me, building a business is a war of attrition, meaning you just got to stay alive, don't die, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm early on something, I'm like, okay, there's going to be a lot of difficulties and things that we're going to have to navigate in order to deliver an outcome, in order to start validating where we want to be and that we're seeing this correctly. Along that journey, you can either, get hit by the different meteors and kind of setbacks and things that are, causing you to fumble or falter or, the negative signs. Or you can, again, just rest in this concept of I'm taking a big bet. I know what my end goal is. I see enough qualitatively and quantitatively through research to feel comfortable and confident about what we're building. So let me just write it out. Let me just get creative with problem solving. Let me apply critical thinking and creativity to navigating obstacles and just staying alive. Because ultimately, the market is going to catch up.
Yeah.
It usually does, unless you're just really, really wrong about something. But like I said, we've talked to enough people and they're like, oh, this works, but like, this is why it doesn't work. And every time I hear it, this is why it doesn't work, it's like an infrastructural limitation that I can see being removed in the near future.
At that point, it's just a matter of time. Just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So, like, throughout this whole journey, like, I think you said 11 years of kind of this occurring, like, being where Fandundr is at now, what would you say is, like, the most rewarding, like, piece at this point? That makes, like, the journey worth it, you know?
That's a good question. So I was actually talking to my co-founders about this yesterday, the day before. So we've been vibe coding a lot. Another part of this journey that's been really frustrating, which is again another question you didn't ask, is before the last, I'd say like 6 months, being a non-technical founder, trying to build a code intensive, technically intensive product, right?
Yeah.
It was obviously difficult.
Yeah. Sure.
And, I say that as someone who considers himself enough to be dangerous, knows enough to be dangerous in terms of product, right? Specifically within the realm of product-led growth and just kind of like interfacing with the development team to achieve an outcome, right? That's usually business-driven, but not at all a programmer, not at all a coder. Spent a lot of time going through like CTOs trying to find technical co-founders, engineers, spending money on engineers to build this and just kind of getting burned, et cetera. Finally found a CTO who fits. He just happens to be one of my best friends. Shout out Valentine, senior engineer at Google and Waymo, just a badass engineer, one of the smartest people on this planet. Sincerely say that.
Shout out him.
Shout out V. Shout out P for introducing me to but the most rewarding thing has not only been having him on the team, but now having AI in our hands to vibe code and seeing his face every time we, basically implement a large integration or tackle something that the scope would normally be, 20, 30 hours worth of coding for an experienced level engineer. We do that in like an hour. And just seeing him just be like,
Yeah.
I see where the future is going.
Yeah.
And knowing what that means for us, because again, this whole thing of being early, right, where so much of this journey isn't just about the market. A lot of this journey is about who you are as a founder and, what's happening in your personal life. And, we could do a whole nother episode about like that piece, right? And how this journey has kind of evolved over the last 3 years since I left Kobiton. The point being, so much of that kind of early feeling was not only about market readiness, but also about the ability to deliver a technical solution and to kind of scale and to be reactive and proactive to market dynamics, right? And market feedback. And before a week ago, 2 weeks ago, since we've really been kind of deep in this vibe coding, I was looking at running a business and building a startup through one lens of kind of capacity / containerized limitation in terms of how fast you can go, what you can produce, how agile you can be with releases and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. In the last 2 weeks, man, it really feels like it's a limitless opportunity for anyone who is able to communicate design and architecture theory to AI effectively and efficiently, right? So I'm not going to sit here and be like, any average Joe / like non-technical person can just build whatever they want using something like Cursor AI, right? But I will say that if you are someone with a designer background, if you're someone who, has maybe like a business analyst with a product focused lens, if you're even remotely technical, right? You can do a lot. But if you pair that with someone who is technically proficient and you leverage these tools, you can build, measure, learn that whole startup loop very quickly. And so, to answer your question about one of the most rewarding things at this journey or at this point, in the journey, it's really seeing like, okay, we've spent so long grinding in this traditional sense and it was so hard and that shit sucked. And now we're in this new world where I'm like, oh, wait, not only is the market catching up, but me and my team are also kind of on the forward end or at the tip of the spear of leveraging AI throughout our entire operational stack to go really, really fast and to learn really, really fast and to be able to ingest market feedback and rapidly iterate, right? To provide a better solution. And so, I'm just really excited about this next version of our product getting out, our ability to more easily, cheaply, and quickly market and promote the product and get people using it. Again, all thanks to AI, right? Even our ability to like ingest the data and, pull analysis out of it that we may not think about and then apply that back into like feature suggestions or optimizations. Again, all through the lens of like, hey, here's how I'm thinking about this, but like AI, what do you think? Right. And then go build those features with AI, just vibe coding, right? I'm just like, we're in this loop where, again, this is, I'll caveat it like this. I also understand that we're not, the size of Google yet, right? So this concept of like sprinting and running with AI kind of embedded into every single department and, driving a lot of it isn't going to be sustainable in the way that we're doing it. This is working very much for anyone who wants to start a startup, and you need to get through your first couple of iterations, right? Maybe to, raising a pre-seed, seed round. The barrier to entry is just, it's below the floor
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like this kind of off topic, but regarding AI, like in relation to, people who, may go to college or, spend their entire life kind of becoming an expert in these things, like you said, the price floor is pretty low using AI versus using, somebody like that and having to spend a lot more money,
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that, like for the future and the job market with that?
Me and Valentine have been talking about this ad nauseum. Man, it's gonna get ugly if you don't leverage it.
Yeah.
I think, my most direct, blunt, without being offensive response to that is do it. Don't have the aversion to it that, is cliche of, oh, this is gonna replace my job, so like
Yeah.
I'm gonna shit on it, or like that's not a real thing. I'm telling you right now, I'm sitting next to somebody every day who's seeing this at the highest level in programming self-driving cars through the city of Atlanta, and he's like, it's over.
Yeah. It's here.
It's here.
It's here.
So I would say, if you're a college student, the skills in 2030, from my perspective, that are going to be most lucrative and just foundationally helpful for your life living, right, is critical thinking, creativity, risk tolerance, right?
Mm.
And then I'd say storytelling, right? Because, and I'd say the fifth one is communicating design. So
Okay.
critical thinking, creativity, risk tolerance, storytelling, communication of design, right? If you can communicate design with these new AI interfaces that are getting better every single day, because they've got people like me training their models on like new ways to use it, because I'm really exploiting it. So
As you're supposed to do.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Run it up. If you can apply critical thinking and communication of design to that tool stack, you can really build a lot, at least enough to, either start generating revenue through whatever mechanism is related to your endeavor, or to raise money if you're trying to start a startup or a business, right? I think the storytelling is going to come into play because you're going to see a flattening of the landscape in terms of, if the technology barrier to entry is so low and it's not hard to push a product into the market, right? You're going to see a saturation of products, right? And what's going to have you rising, falling is your ability to capture attention, your ability to build brand affinity, to connect with an audience, and storytelling and creativity are going to be what guide you through that process and help you be effective there. The last one, which is risk tolerance, is just something I throw in there based on my journey since I was 18 and every leap I've taken in my career. So first time I started Fandundr, like I said, 10 years or 11 years ago. Before that, I was a marketing manager at a marketing agency, and we had huge clients like Coca-Cola, VH1.
Okay.
VH1 is because you're really young.
No, I know
VH1. Cable was a
VH1.
thing. It's like that's where all the old stars went to die. Flavor Flav and all that good stuff. So like we had some really big clients there, so I learned a lot about marketing and whatnot. But I hadn't yet really dipped my toe into like what would be like the true startup experience from a technical company standpoint, building software, so on and so forth. That little stint I did with Fandundr at that time, which was about 6-8 months, and then after that, I created another startup because, like I said, I folded. But in the process of doing customer discovery for that second startup, so this is totally maybe like 8 or 9 months, right?
Okay.
In the process of doing customer discovery for that second startup, I was interviewing a guy named Josh Lieberman who had a company called KMS, which was the parent company of what would become Kobiton. And
Okay.
he asked me to come be the first employee at Kobiton. My startup knowledge and experience, even though it's very nascent, right, differentiated me enough from the candidate pool of other 24, 25-year-olds that he was looking at in terms of how I was thinking about business from a holistic standpoint,
Yeah.
right? Not just in my silo of like, oh, let me go do marketing,
Yeah.
right? Gave me enough of that to like impress him enough to say, come be my first employee. And at that point, I touched every angle of the business, right? And kind of quantum leaped over the next 7 years to where like now I'm back out here as a startup operator and armed with more knowledge. Point being, if I hadn't taken that first risk to try to start it back then, I wouldn't have gained the holistic perspective that would have made me a better employee at a startup as an early employee, which then fed my knowledge to then go back out into the world and be a better founder, right? And so I would say risk tolerance in terms of just trying shit. You know what I mean? Like, especially when you're young, you have nothing to lose virtually. You can always bounce back. You can always get it back as long as you're good. You know what I mean? You can always get it back. So just take the risk, you know, and then again, especially in this new phase where you can push something out immediately, get feedback, iterate, et cetera, just take the risk. You know, give yourself a year, 2 years, just go see what you can make in the world. Job market will be waiting for you as long as you come back with some better skills, you know, and like the ability to leverage AI. You'll be good to go.
So why not? You know, while you can at least.
100%.
Yeah. Is there anything else you kind of want to talk about? I think I kind of.
No, man, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah. I appreciate you for coming on. If any of you guys want to reach out to Fandundr and Drew, where can they reach you at?
Yeah, so you can check us out at fanfundr.com. That is FANFUNDR.com. There's no E. You can reach me at drew@fanfundr.com if you want to reach me on email. You can hit me up on IG. My handle is Drew W. So DRE, the letter W, and then the word double, like DOUBLE, and then the letter U, because my name is Drew. So Drew. If you see it written, it'll make sense to you. You'll be like, oh, that's crazy.
It's different.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. And then outside of that, LinkedIn, you know, the tried and true professional network that I'm very curious to see how you feel about as a Gen Z. Like, you on that?
Yeah, so I literally just got on it like probably 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and it was because of an assignment that they had to. It made us do it, you know. Because I don't know. I don't know why. That's a terrible mindset, but I was just like, man, I don't really see the point of LinkedIn. Like I understood it, but I just was like, why can't I just, you know, meet people or like, you know, I don't know. It just
I feel you. I hear you.
Seemed different, but
it's I'm interested to see what happens with that platform in the next like 5 or 7 years, honestly. Again, like I said, especially as you come into this world where you see more people being equipped to be entrepreneurs, and or creators. It's like, you know, yeah.
So you're saying like you feel like it's kind of gonna wither out a little bit?
I won't give it a hot take like that.
Okay.
I'm just curious to see the adoption rate amongst the next like cohort of professionals. You know, I'm not gonna don't quote me on LinkedIn failing.
Yeah, because I don't know. I mean, it might though, because it might not, because like if universities and stuff are forcing you to do it, it's just come like a standard thing, you know.
I think I will say this. I think what we will see is more of this push towards personal branding.
Yeah.
For both, you know, employees of companies as well as people, you know, pursuing entrepreneurship. So in that regard, you know, perhaps it becomes like this new, you know, like newslettery kind of, you know, here's my Medium/blog, you know, interface for my professional life. At least that's how I'm kind of starting to right now.
Yeah, I can see that. All right. Well, I appreciate you for coming on, man. We definitely got to have another episode, you know, kind of digging a little deeper. Yeah. Thank y'all for tuning in to Building in the Burbs. We will see y'all next time.
Appreciate you.